Hi, this is AJ. Welcome back to the Handyman process. In today's video, we're going to be talking about lesson 3 in my series of the simple path to Handyman. Lesson 3 is going to be a pivotal lesson because it's going to talk about the Handyman framework. And this is the framework that I use to operate my business. And it's made up of several different steps, processes supported by systems. And this will become the basis of videos going further because I'm going to take bits and pieces of this framework and start to dive a little further into it. So by the end of all these lessons, we'll have walked through the entire framework process so you understand it. So stay tuned. Okay, so when I talk about framework, what I'm talking about is a series of processes and systems that you have to have in place in order to effectively run your handyman business. I'm going to be talking in generics at first on some of these processes and some of these systems. And then as I move forward, I'll give examples of the systems that I've used to implement my processes across my handyman business. So the first and the most important process, which I call the primary process, is a repeatable process that you're going to do over and over and over again within your business in some form or fashion. If you run a handyman business, you'll go through this process. So I like to call this a or horizontal process, going from left to right, inquiry over to invoice and payment. So if you follow along, inquiry is simply somebody's reaching out to you for some type of work. And this comes in many different forms and fashions. It's primarily supported by your marketing process. In my particular case, I get inquiries Facebook, Nextdoor, Google, phone call, text message, through my website, all sorts of things. So that's the beginning part. Somebody needs me, or somebody wants a handyman, and they reach out. Step number two is assuming that the inquiry reached out to you, they're probably looking for an estimate. So that moves into step number two is the estimate. So this is where you go through and you gather the details of what the scope of work is that the client is looking for, and you go ahead and you produce your estimate to satisfy that requirement. A lot of questions around estimating. So again, we'll be diving further into that later on. Um, Now, here's a point of divergence. Actually, of all these steps, there's points of divergence where you may not move to the next block. So if your estimate is approved by the client, then you move on to the next block. If it's not approved or they just never contact you, which happens a lot, the cycle just starts over again. And this primary process moves along throughout the year. You're constantly executing it, and it may be executed 10 times in a day at different stages of the process. So just keep that in mind. It's just repeated over and over and over again. So assuming that the estimate was approved by your client, the next step is generating a work order. So you take that estimate, you turn it into a work order. Okay, I'm going to complete this job based off the estimate that I provided, and you schedule it. Um, Once that's done, then you move on to actually completing the work. So you show up to the client's place of wherever they need the work done. You show up, you complete the work, and then the final piece of that is being paid for it. So you send an invoice, you receive a payment, and you're done. And then the process again repeats over and over again. So if you've been doing this business for a while, you have some form of process that you're doing this in right now. It could be a very advanced computer systems. It could be just hand notes. It could be Google Sheets. It could be all sorts of things. And there's a tons of people out there that will show you their different ways. But just keep in mind, we're all going through the same process in some form or fashion. So that's step number one, is understanding the primary process and just admitting, yeah, this is what I'm going to go through. If you feel like there's something I'm missing here, go ahead and leave a comment down below. If what I'm providing right now is making sense to you, you like it, go ahead and hit the thumbs up and stay tuned as we move on to the next direct supporting process. So next we have the direct supporting process. I'm going to move my camera down here a little bit. Okay. Now, when I say direct supporting processes, what I mean are processes that are supporting that primary process. And I've kind of bucketed them to where they belong. So if we look at the inquiry box up here, for example, the inquiry box is primarily supported by your marketing process, whatever that process may be. You could be just all word of mouth, that's marketing. You could be running Facebook ads. You could be posting in community groups. You could be running advertisements on your website, all sorts of things. What you're trying to do is you're trying to generate a buzz so you get inquiries that lead to the estimate and on down the line in the primary process. So that's one of your direct supporting process. The next one is your estimating process. Like I mentioned earlier, for each of these processes, I'm going to be diving further in and explaining how I do it, some other best practices out there, and some other options. So stay tuned in this series as I dive a little further into it. But from an estimating process, somebody gives you their scope of work. I need two toilets changed and two blinds changed. How do you figure that out, right? You have some process right now, and maybe your process is asking somebody else, how much, what should I charge for this? Or maybe you've advanced a little while, and you have some data behind you, and you have a little bit more refined process. Moving down the line to a scheduling process. How do I take this job that I just landed and put it on my schedule? How do I do that? Moving down the line, when I say completing work, um, you have to be able to, like, if we use the example of two toilets and some blinds, you have to be able to complete that work. So you're either you have expertise, you're gaining expertise, or you're maintaining expertise. You're constantly in this loop. Like if you do the same jobs over and over again, your level of expertise and proficiency is probably pretty good. But I would argue never stop learning, never stop gaining, never stop maintaining your expertise in that different area. And there's multiple different ways that you can gain and maintain that kind of expertise. And then the final piece is, okay, the job's all done. My tools are packed up. It's back in the truck. How do I get paid? So I'll dive a little further in future episodes into various payment and receipt processes. So these, like I mentioned earlier, are your direct supporting processes to that primary process. Then moving down the line, we have what I call these foundational systems. So these foundational systems are a supporting layer to both the supporting process and the primary process. And I've stacked them in that way. You can almost see it as a house. This is the foundation of a house, and you build other things on top of that and other things on top of that. And if you don't have a strong foundation, it's hard to execute either your direct supporting process or your primary processes. So what I have down here below is just a sample of what I think to be the most important foundational systems. The first one being a customer relation management, or commonly referred to as a CRM system. There's multiple examples of these types of systems out there. Again, you can have pen and paper, which could be your CRM system. You could be running a more advanced software platform like Mark8 or Jobber or House Call Pro or Service Fusion. There's a ton of these different systems out there. But again, they are all supporting, they're definitely supporting the primary process, and some of them may be supporting the direct supporting processes. It really depends on the type of CRM that you have. And I listed that one first because some other of the features that I have listed down here may be captured in your CRM and it may not. So moving down the line, I have the other foundational system of communication. How am I staying in touch with my clients, my vendors, whoever you're talking to throughout this whole process from inquiry to invoice and payment? Are you doing everything by phone? Are you doing things through your CRM? How do you do that, right? Communication is key in this business. If you don't communicate well with your clients, the word's going to get out. Your reviews are going to reflect that, and it's going to have a negative impact on you. So having some type of system for communication. And to be honest with you, through my observations, a lot of people use multiple systems to stay in communication. They may use a piece of their CRM for automatic notifications. They may be using they may have somebody in the office, a virtual assistant, keeping in touch with clients, kind of going back and forth. Maybe using advanced phone systems and other tech systems. AI is coming down the line right now, so you may be using chat bots. All sorts of different types of systems out there that you can use for communication. But again, it's a supporting layer to those other processes. Down below that, I kind of tried to lump some more the money, the business, and the tax stuff there together. So you have your banking process. I mentioned in my previous video on getting your business up and started, the small time operators guidebook to setting up something. And in that book, you're going to read, go ahead and set up a business bank and go ahead and keep your business money separate, right? So it's very, very important that you have some type of business bank, whether it's a local credit union, whether it's something online, to kind of manage your money. I'll talk it down the line how I do this. But the important thing is that you have some type of business bank set up. And again, the book in lesson number 2 is a pretty good, give you a pretty good background on kind of what to look for in banking services. That is also complemented by the second thing I have here, which is bookkeeping. Bookkeeping is really keeping records of your money, what's coming in, what's going out, and then being able to look at that data at any given time to kind of see where you are financially. Um, I, as a one man operation, kind of combine my banking and bookkeeping in the same platform, but a lot of other people will keep them separate. They may have banking at a local business bank, they may have several different credit cards, and they may use something like QuickBooks to pull all the bookkeeping together. Again, multiple different ways to do it. And when I get into that chapter or that lesson on banking and bookkeeping, I'll dive a little further into that. The next one is tax strategy. So, what I want you to think about here is throughout all of this execution of your business, from inquiry to payment to all the supporting processes, you're spending money and you're stimulating the economy is really what you're doing. You're providing value to the economy, and as such, you can take advantage of certain tax provisions that are written within the IRS code that favor and incentivize you as a small business owner to keep doing what you're doing to stimulate the economy. So there's opportunities for tax strategy throughout this all these processes. And on the systems that we're using, they can be written off as part of your tax strategy. So a ton of stuff there. Again, I'll be diving into a little further. And then as part of that tax strategy and tax tracking and money tracking, I just threw mileage tracking in here because that's a primary um, tax incentive for you as a handyman. So if you're brand new to this and you're not doing anything else, at the very least, start tracking your mileage, whether you're doing it manually or you're doing something like I do with an app called Mile IQ. Start tracking your mileage so that at the end of the year, all the times that you use your vehicles for service, you can deduct. Or there's other ways of doing that if you choose another route, which I'll get into in my tax strategy lessons further down the line. And then final, you have this stuff that nobody really likes to talk about, nobody really likes to deal with, but you have the legal compliance. Are you a legal business? Are you licensed in your area? Um, do you have an LLC? Are you basically following all the rules and regulations for running a business wherever you're operating out of, whether it's federal, state, local, whatever it may be? In addition to that, I have risk mitigation processes in here as well because a lot of people will set up a business, for example, as an LLC, a limited liability corporation. That's a risk mitigation process. That's a process or a system that you're using to try to limit the risk that you, as an individual and your family and all the assets you may have, from being kind of tangled up in this if something goes wrong. And then finally, you have this kind of layer of insurance that kind of wraps all this stuff around. So having all these things in place are vital and very, very important. And like I mentioned in further episodes, I plan to dive a little further into these. Um, so stay tuned. Hopefully, this is making sense as I walk through these different layers, these processes, and these systems. This is how I look at my business every day. I look at it through the lens of these different things, and I'm always making tweaks in certain areas to try to make myself a little bit more efficient, to add a little bit more tax strategy, to save a little money, to do all these different types of things. But as you repeat these processes and over again, you develop this muscle memory. And there's a saying out there that says, repetition is the mother of skill. So if you want to build skill in certain areas here, just keep repeating these processes over and over and over again. And use a template like this. You can see it's not complicated. Go ahead and write out what your processes are. What do you have in place? You can check off, do I have insurance? Am I tracking mileage? Do I have a tax strategy? Um, and then if there's certain things you want me to cover in these topics that I've talked about here, which I'm planning to make future videos on, go ahead and drop a comment down below. Let me know, hey, can you talk a little bit about this in your banking video or your tax strategy video? I do have videos out there already on some of these topics, but not in this framework, not in this simple path to handyman framework that I'm trying to put together right now. Because what I'm really doing is I'm building a playlist for somebody that's just starting off in this, that wants somewhere to start in step one, step two, step three, so on and so on. And it also gives me a chance to update some videos that I made before I really know what I was doing with video software and whatnot. Not that I know what I'm doing now, but I am getting a little bit better at a little bit at a time. Again, repetition is the mother of skill. So if you enjoy this kind of content, you want to see more, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, let me know, and stay tuned for the next video. Appreciate it. Bye.